Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Nothing's better than eating a fresh picked strawberry right out of your own garden. Today we're going to plant some to eat later. Also, getting the right landscape plants for your area will give you the best results with the least amount of work. That's just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Goodwin's Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Tom Mashore. Tom is an Extension Master Gardener in Tipton County, and Jim Crowder will be joining us later. Hi, Mr. Tom.
Hi, Chris.
How's it going?
It is going well.
We're good. We're out in our Family Plot garden.
Yep.
And you're going to show us how to plant strawberries.
Yes, and UT has a recommended way of doing it for commercial farmers or garden strawberry growers. And I figure if it's good enough for them, which their livelihood depends on, it should also be good for us in our home gardening.
Well, it should work pretty good. UT has some good stuff, huh?
Absolutely.
Good.
That's one of my reference points always.
Good. Glad to hear it.
First place to go. Okay, well, one of the things they recommend is a white covering over the soil. Now, normally they prefer a long dome shape one, raising it off the ground. But in our particular conditions, I don't think that's necessary. But the white cover is, and it has 3 functions. Number 1, it keeps the strawberries off the ground. So you don't get any rotting of strawberries or those little critters eating the bottom of them. Number 2, it retains moisture. And finally, number 3, that it reflects the heat. As you know, in the Mid-South, rain is very few and far between in the summertime. So that's how we're going to plant them. What this is actually just a shower kernel liner from a dollar store. Obviously, it costs $1.
All right.
Okay, they're 70 inches by 72 inches. So what I did is I cut it long ways in 4 strips, or basically quartering it. And the reason for that is I get more bang for the buck.
Gotcha.
Okay, so what we did is we laid out 2 of those strips together. They're approximately 6 feet long, and I overlapped them about a couple inches. And the purpose of overlapping them is because we don't get that rain in the summertime. I can open it up right there and water it, and then cover it back up again.
Smart.
That way, it's so much easier to water that way. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and plant our strawberries. Now, UT again recommends spacing them approximately 12 inches apart in 2 rows, with each row offset of each other by about 6 inches. So it gives them more room to grow. So let's get to it. Okay, what I'm going to do again is just cut some slits into the plastic where I'm going to plant them. And just cut a lip. It slices up real easy. All right, now we're going to go ahead and plant them. Since these are already in pots, it makes it easier. Going to get a sooner crop and don't have to worry about drying out as quick. Okay, Chris, may I?
Yes.
Okay,
nice plants, don't you think?
Absolutely. They're very healthy looking.
Now, how deep would you plant those?
Actually, just you actually should tear this. Let me tear this off here at the top, because you do not want any of the peat pot sticking above the ground. What it'll do is just wick out the moisture. This is the crown right here. You don't want it any deeper than that. If worse comes to shove, you may have it a little bit higher. But typically you plant it where the crown is even with the soil, or at least the same depth that it was in the pot. There we go. Well, the first one is planted. Now we can go on to the next one.
Okay.
And by the way I'm holding these things down is I'm using these little garden stakes you get for putting in ground cloth. It holds them down fine, and they come up easy. And they're cheap. You can also make your own from the old-fashioned metal coat hangers. On to the next one.
Okay.
Again, approximately 12 inches, right about there. One nice thing about raised beds is it's usually good soil all the way down, so you usually don't have that clay layer as you do in a typical garden. Now your average garden plant, vegetable plants, the root zone is about 6 inches down, which is fine because our topsoil is usually only about 6 inches deep anyway. All right.
All right. And before I hand that to you, let me take this weed seed that's in there out of there.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to introduce that?
No. Again, peeling off the top of the peat pot and popping it in there. And I have no problems using my fingers. Yeah, I guess a happy gardener is one who's got dirt under their nails. And strawberries is not a very critical plant. You give it just a light touch and so forth, that's cool. There's only so much energy available from any plant, be it tomato plant, pepper plant, or strawberry plant, for producing the fruit. Thus, the first strawberries are going to be good size, but then as more and more strawberries appear, they're going to get progressively smaller. So if you want big strawberries, you do need to thin out the blossoms. If you don't care, then just let them produce. Okay, this is the last one of the 10.
All right, it's looking good too.
Yeah. Now, typically they will produce their additional runners, which you can pot up or put them in containers and save them for next spring. Strawberries plants are usually good for about 2 years, and then they gotta be replenished. And you can use runners to replenish them.
Do we need to remove any of the flowers, any of the berries that are present on the plants right
now? I previously mentioned that the fewer flowers, the fewer the strawberries, the larger the strawberries are going to be. Now my son, he likes to do them and gives them away, but he gets them about that big and dips them in chocolate and then makes swirls around them and the whole bit. But so the fewer, the bigger they're going to be.
Sure.
The ones you pick off, the small ones, they're edible. They're just not as pretty as the big ones are.
Sure.
And then if you all remember that we have 2 pieces of plastic here, and the reason for that, so I can open up the center one, take those little clips out, water it, and then put it back together again. As far as the dirt, it looks kind of messy on the outside, but the first rain is going to wash it all
Mother
off.
Nature take care of that.
So they'll handle it.
All right.
They're healthy plants, and
They look good.
I expect them to be good, and I'll be out here in a month picking. No.
Yeah. And I don't beat you to them. I love
Yeah, you
strawberries.
probably will be.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Todd, we appreciate that
Okay,
demonstration.
my man.
Thank you much.
I enjoy doing it.
All right. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Mr. Jim, I see we have some plants on the table here.
Yes, we brought a few that are just really easy to grow, low maintenance plants.
Easy, low maintenance.
Easy to grow.
Wow.
As long as you get the green side up, they'll grow.
All right.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about a few of them. Right. The first one we've got over here, this is an oak leaf holly. I like this one because it makes a good corner plant. It's only going to get about 8 to 10 feet tall, and it grows conical, so you don't have to do much trimming. Now, like most, like me, I grew up before I grew out. They do the same thing. So you have to do a little tip trimming to thicken them up. But it's a great plant, and it's, you know, one of the few hollies that is both male and female. So if you've got it, it'll produce berries even without another one around. It's a really good plant, and it's not, although it looks sticky, it's not. You can put your hand in there and not come out bleeding. So that's a good plant for a corner. The next one we're going to talk about here is an abelia. Used to, the abelias were large, leggy, ugly-looking plants, but they've done so much in hybridizing now. This one is kaleidoscope. This one, bright green foliage in the spring, and then as the season progresses, you get pinks and yellows, and it's going to max out around 4 feet. But there are new low ones. There's twist of lime, twist of orange, twist of lemon, and you kind of gather what color they're going to be by the foliage. But they're really a huge selection. They bloom most of the summer. They're really, really a good plant, and you don't have to do much to them. Okay.
And usually when I hear about abelias, bees.
Yes,
the bees hang around.
They do. If you want to bring bees to your garden, it's good. It's not a plant I'd put by the pool, but it is a good plant. The next one is a native plant, the Yaupon holly. Now this is a dwarf one, and this is a male. It doesn't produce berries, but it's a great foundation plant, background plant for perennials. If you let it go, eventually it would get 5 or 6 feet tall, but it'd be very long time getting there. 1 or 2 trimmings a year, and you can keep it at 2 or 3 feet or whatever you want, but nothing bothers it. It's good drought resistance. You just can't have a more dependable plant. And there's so many variations of the Yaupon. Some are tree form, some are weeping. There's a new one called Scarlet's Peak that grows like a telephone pole. That's a very heavy barrier. It's just, there's just a remarkable group of plants. Okay.
All right.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
How can you tell a male from a female plant?
Well, only when it's in bloom is the only way. If you catch it when it's in flower, the flower looks like a tiny dogwood flower. If you look in the center and there's a hole, that is a little boy. If there's a ball in the center, that's a female.
Oh, very good.
But you got to catch them in bloom. If you see a berry on it, you know that it's a female.
That's right.
Okay. All right. And any holly will pollinate any other holly as long as they're blooming at the same time, and that's the key. If you have a deciduous holly, you got to make sure you have the right male, otherwise you won't have berries. Okay. Nandinas are another one that was an old-time plant that people like to cut the berries at Christmas. Grew 6 feet tall, got leggy and ugly. But there are hundreds of varieties. Now, this is a new one called Lemon Lime, and it's absolutely beautiful. Only gets about 3 feet tall. There's one called Harbor Bell that only gets about 6 to 8 inches and produces berries, which a lot of the dwarfs don't. So there's a world of new ones in blush pink colors, bright reds, oranges. They've just done a whole lot with Nandinas. And again, you have no issues with them at all. No insects, no diseases. They're just really a great plant.
No insects, no diseases. How about that? There you go.
You can't get one any better than Nandina.
That's right.
The last one we're going to talk about here, and it's something that a lot of people don't think about for foundation planting, is a blueberry. They're great plants, good fall red color. They're going to get about 6 feet tall. You trim them once a year, but you don't have to do that until about year 4 or 5, and you get all the berries. Now these are rabbit eyes, or they're the ones that are best suited for the South, so you need to have at least 2 and preferably 3 varieties to get good pollination. But it's a wonderful, wonderful plant. Very few insects or diseases bother them. In the shade, the plant looks a little better, but it doesn't berry as much, but it'll put it out in full sun, and you'll get some red color during the growing season. You'll have all these berries, you know, one for the kid next door, one for the bird, one for you. So but it's really an underlooked plant that Memphis has an evergreen mentality, and they have trouble planting things that are going to be deciduous in front of their house, but they miss out on hydrangeas and blueberries and so many really cool things.
I like the evergreen mentality. How about that?
They do. You know, so many people go, does it die in the winter? Yeah, and it's born again in the spring. Hallelujah. It's, you know, but you know, deciduous doesn't mean bad. It just means it drops its leaf.
Now, let me ask you this. So how do we prepare our soils?
Well,
for these
the
plants
most important thing is loosening. You know, most everything that we grow here that we like doesn't grow here naturally. It likes less heavy soils, better drainage than we have. So that's the key. Plant everything here high. Dig no deeper than your container, and we want it to stick up about like this, because when we have, like last night, heavy rains, we want to have part of that root ball exposed to air so that it doesn't drown.
Okay.
So many plants won't tolerate that for long periods of time. And even though the plant may actually die in that water, you may not know it for several months. It'll sprout, look good, and then along about June, it dies and you blame your husband. But it died 3 months earlier. You just didn't know it. So, you know, loosening soil is most important. Twice as wide, mix some organic matter in there, but don't overdo it. 15, 20% like y'all were talking about earlier is about right. Okay.
Now, let's talk about, how about pruning? Especially like the Yaupon holly. We get that question all the time. What's the best way to do that, though?
Well, it depends on what you want. Most people take plants like this, that type, and shear it for
over the top.
And that's okay. Okay. If you were to let it grow, it would be more natural, open, and airy. But with things like that, just tip trim them, and you can do them pretty much any time. But you want to stop about the 1st of July. After that, the new growth is not likely to harden off for winter, and you can get some burn back in it. So anytime from March up till then, you can trim it as much as you want. Now, you know, things like hollies, like the oak leaf there, you want to trim from the inside usually. Reach down in there if you've got a place that's open and let it re-break and fill back up through there. Okay.
Gotcha.
With blueberries, what you'll do is about year 5, you'll see some canes down in there that look like birch trees. They've begun to split and have loose bark on them. Take out 3 or 4 of the oldest ones, because about 5 years is all you'll get a good production out of a cane.
I was going to ask you that. Okay.
Yeah,
5 years. Okay.
And then let them re-sprout back up through it, and it's just once a year, right after you've harvested the fruit, then go ahead and cut them back.
Now about the blueberries, what about the sphagnum moss?
Well,
I've heard that you put it in the.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of sphagnum moss. Okay, now they do like a very low pH, you know, 4.5 to 5,
wow, that's low.
and they're real happy at that. Like, you know, even more acidic than azaleas. So that's critical that you get them in that range to get good production. And usually you can add a little aluminum sulfate or something like that. You know, if you ever go to a peat moss bog up in Canada, nothing grows there but peat moss and pine trees. So, you know, that kind of tells me something. Mother Nature has done a really good job at just showing us, hey, look, we put leaves and sticks in the ground. You know, don't argue with her. Do what she's wanting you to do.
That's right.
You know?
One problem I had when first time I planted blueberries, I didn't do my homework, and I grabbed every blueberry plant they had at the place I got them from, not knowing there was a difference between north and south blueberries.
Well, there are. Now, the high bush, you'll see southern high bush offered sometimes here. And in fact, University of Georgia is introducing a lot of new varieties. They are self-pollinating, so you don't have to have but one. But it's kind of a misnomer because high bush don't get as tall as rabbit eyes. You know, but they're just not well suited for our poor drainage here and our hot night soils. You'll have much better luck with rabbit eyes.
Mr. Jim, good stuff, man.
Hey, glad to do it,
man.
Chris. Always a pleasure.
All right, thank you much.
Typically, I use 3 basic fertilizers in my vegetable garden. The first one is 6-12-12. You notice it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. On root crops like carrots, beets, radishes, you don't want a lot of nitrogen, otherwise you're going to get a lot of foliage, but no fruit. So by having a 6-12-12, more of it goes into the actual growing of the bulbs, carrots, beets. 34-00, which is all nitrogen, no phosphorus or potassium, I like to use this on green crops. So I use 34-00 on crops like lettuce, broccoli, spinach, or your various greens that you grow. For all else, like squash, cucumbers, watermelon, corn, tomatoes, I like a balanced fertilizer. In this case, I use 15-15-15, but you can just use 10-10-10, except when you're using 10-10-10, you use a little bit more. If you're using 15-15-15, you use a little bit less.
All right, this is our Q&A session. Mr. Jim, you jump in there and help us out, all right?
Anytime.
All right, here's the first viewer email. What is the best mulch to use around plants and trees? What do you think about that?
Well, you know, I'm real partial to pine needles. They're easy to apply. You get good air movement through them. You know, it kind of depends on what you're doing. Cypress mulch lasts longer than hardwood. Hardwood is slightly acidic. pine bark is actually slightly alkaline because it's got calcium in it. So it's kind of up to you how much you want to spend. But to me, if you know, I think that pine needles are probably the most attractive and the less damaging to plants. You know, because we think about mulch, what we're doing is trying to moderate the soil temperature and keep weeds down. But mulch doesn't go away. You know, people will go out and they'll say, oh, I need to remulch.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't gone, it's just decomposed into a very fine powder. And then it looks like black stuff and they go, oh, I've got topsoil, but it's not, it's mulch dust. And then you add more mulch and it gets deeper and deeper and you start slowing your air movement through the soil, which is critical. Your azaleas will begin to yellow, the leaves will dwarf down, and it's because we've taken a mountain plant, you know, and planted it in flat ground, heavy clay, and covered it with 4 inches of mulch.
Yes.
So it just cannot breathe. So that's the main thing, is when you feel that need to remulch, get it all out. Start over. Get down to feeder
good
roots.
stuff.
And do about 2 inches of good coarse mulch regardless.
Good stuff. All right, here's our first, next viewer email. The back of my camellia leaves have bugs on them. What are they and how do I get rid of the bugs? And this is from Mr. Wayne. And we actually have, you know, some camellia leaves here. T-scales.
T-scales, that's right. The
T-scales.
camellia is a tea. The tea that you drink comes from
Yes.
Camellia sinensis. And this is called T-scale, gets on the back of the leaves. And you almost always find it around the base of the plant.
Yeah.
And if it's just a little bit on the bottom, I don't even worry about it. It's not a significant issue. But when it starts to move up the plant, if the plant is stressed, then I'd want to get an oil spray on it and smother it. This is a perfect time of year to do that. Or do a systemic if you've got a really severe case. You could do imidacloprid as a drench early in the season, control it all year for you. But if you're in a hurry and need to address it, then something like acephate would be much quicker.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Anything to add to that, Mr. Tom?
No, I mean, he covered it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, T-scales, very familiar.
I love camellias. I've
camellias.
got 15 or 20 varieties in my
Oh,
yard,
okay.
in
So you
full
know all
bloom
about it.
right now, and it's just, you know, it's sad that we got away from them years ago when
Yeah.
the camellias, the crepe myrtles froze to the ground. People started planting crepe myrtles again, but they just kind of didn't start with camellias again.
How about
So,
that?
Beautiful plants.
All right. Yeah, my grandmother had plenty of them in her yard, so you're exactly right. The next via email, why are my auto-looking laurels dying? And I'm sure you've gotten that question a time or two,
man,
just
yeah.
like I have.
Almost always, if it's a section dying out, it's Phytophthora root
It's
rot.
root rot, yeah.
Yeah, and it's too much mulch is a contributor. Irrigation systems are a contributor. And, you know, they do much better in Nashville, okay, where the soil drains faster. And it's just, we use them in too much shade here.
Okay.
We shear them to make them thicker, which makes them wet longer.
Yeah.
You get shot hole disease on them. And
That's
then
what I see a
once
lot.
they get stressed, that's when Phytophthora really kicks in. Phytophthora is everywhere. It's waiting just to hit a susceptible plant.
Right.
It's when it gets stressed that it, you know, it grabs hold. So
Right.
There are other options now, like Distilliums, that look very similar that don't have that issue. So I wouldn't think about replacing them. I'd think about changing them to another plant.
Just another plant altogether.
Absolutely. You know.
Yeah, believe it or not, I've seen auto-looking laurels at gas stations.
Oh yeah,
They just
they're,
look-
they're everywhere.
Yeah, just beat up.
Yeah.
You know, the mulch is all the way up to the top of them, and they have the shot hole disease, and
Yeah.
and they're planted poorly most of the time. All right, so here's our next via email. Sometimes I notice that carpenter bees land on flowers and just stay there. Why? Could this be because they're eating treated wood? And this is from Alex up in Knoxville. How about that one?
Well,
They're just there, hanging out.
if they're landing on the flowers, they're probably feeding on pollen or nectar.
I would think so.
Okay. Now they will bore through treated wood
Yes, they
in a
will.
heartbeat. Okay. So
Yes, they will.
that if that's the issue, probably the best product to spray would be something with permethrin in it. It is labeled for wood boring bees. And if it's not exposed to sunlight or water, probably will give you 3 or 4 months control. So if you spray it around the opening or treat or where you think you're likely to get them, wasp nests, things like that, then that usually will prevent the problem beforehand.
Okay.
But you know, normally the bee is just feeding on nectar.
That's what I
And
think
a
it's
lot of
doing.
times they'll sit and just warm their body up too by sitting out in the sunlight. So
Okay, didn't think about that, but they can cause a lot of damage.
they can do substantial damage to it.
All right then, Mr. Jim, it's time we're out of time.
Hey, well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. FamilyPlotGarden.com is a great gardening resource. You can watch past segments, see the garden calendar with dozens of gardening events this month all over the state, or ask us your gardening question. Go check it out. Thanks for watching. I'm Chris Cooper. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Good Winds Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.